Welcome to the Q&A Cafe. We're here this evening. We're in the evening, actually, because we're going to be talking about alcohol. So we're coming to you this evening from the Georgetown Club in Georgetown, and our guest is Derek Brown. I just like calling you the godfather of Washington mixology because you're so many things. But that one sort of wraps it up. And we had thought of having a music intro for you of The Clash.
Okay.
No, we're not doing it now, but no, I know.
I thought you were going to say James Brown, considering that The Godfather, you know.
Well, there you are. I was just looking up all your inspirations that got you into tending bar. But before I read my favorite Derek Brown quote of all, let's just revisit last night, because you and I were together last night, and JP here also, who's going to be with us, mixing and shaking. We were at this incredible dinner at the Smithsonian, the first Julia Child Award Gala. And it was a great time. It was just all the culinary elite, like you, Daniel Boulud, Patrick O'Connell, Jacques Pepin, who got honored, and on and on and on. But I thought what was really interesting, and having you there especially, is that this was happening in Washington.
Yeah.
This wasn't happening in California or New York. The first ever Julia Child Award Gala was happening in Washington. That was remarkable.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, because when you really think about it, Washington, D.C. has been an incredible culinary town. I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves for the great bars and restaurants that have been here for so long, but also Julia Child.
Okay,
well,
not so, you're that movement. I mean,
no, I don't think so. I understand that sort of idea, because people tend to compare us to other cities a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying in terms of the amount of restaurants, but the quality of restaurants, whether it was, you know, looking back historically, we've had so many great chefs.
But we had one of them. You know, it's like we had one Jean-Louis, we had one Gerard. You know, we had these singular, amazing places, but now we have just a proliferation of amazing places.
I think that's accurate.
We can't even keep up.
But if you think about it, we had one Jean-Louis,
yeah,
but we had one Daniel Boulud working for Jean-Louis.
Yeah.
And we had Julia Child living in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, living in Georgetown.
So D.C. has been an epicenter of so many things.
It is.
But it's not the most large scale.
Well, and it's also been very uncertain about owning that kind of sophistication. You know, before we started rolling tape, you and I were talking about Nixon.
Right.
Nixon is known for many things that are negative, but I was always intrigued by the part of him that was the connoisseur.
Right.
He loved to go to Lutèce and have Andre Soltner cook for him. Yes, he also loved Trader Vic's, but he was a man of those kinds of passions. He was famous for having Mr. and Mrs. T's Bloody Mary mix in his office refrigerator, but the fact is he loved Grand Cru Bordeaux wine, you know?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because also a note about Trader Vic's is historically tiki bars were fancier than we think they are today.
That's where I went for my 16th birthday.
Is that right?
Oh my God, that was my introduction to what cocktails are.
And did you have a Mai Tai?
I don't know. My parents were with me. I'm sure. I came to drinking slowly. I'll make a very embarrassing confession. When I first started out as a reporter, I was at United Press International, and I was working with all these crusty old desk men and whatnot, and they'd take me down to Bassin's to try to get me drunk, and I didn't drink. They'd play liar's poker, and they'd drink, and I finally broke down once and said I'd have a Manischewitz and Coke. I've come a long way. I was sort of the same way I had caviar, but I turned around on that too.
Manischewitz and mixology have never been really a great
I said
kind
it was
of
a very
combination.
embarrassing confession to make, but I came to it slowly. But then when I started to discover it, it is a great passion. And I have to say about you, so my teens were, you know, Trader Vic's, and then the next real influence of alcohol was James Bond.
Right.
But the reason that I got in touch with you, well, first of all, we did a TED Talks together.
That's right.
And you were the great closing act on the reinvention of the cocktail. And at that same time, Mad Men was happening.
Yep.
You'd opened up the Columbia Room, which was Washington's first speakeasy, quite a remarkable place too. And when you invited me to come there and I was going to do a story about it, I said, make me the drinks of Mad Men
Right.
because they were all new to me. And I came to the Columbia Room and you made me an old fashioned, you made me a Manhattan, you made me a Gibson.
Right.
You made me, I don't know, it was 5 drinks then, right? In the old
Yeah, I
days,
think
the
you got
Columbia
5
Room.
drinks down.
I know
It's
you
pretty
did.
good.
No, this is for
you
real.
left standing, so that's good.
When you went to, how many of you went to the Columbia Room while it was, yeah, it was just, oh, it will reopen. We'll get to that. But it was 5 drinks
Right.
and what, $58,
Well, it's-
$52?
It's generally 3 cocktails as part of the tasting.
Now.
But you would ask for a couple extra ones to just for
It-
research purposes.
Right.
I understand that. You wanted to understand the drinks of Mad Men. But here's one of the funny things that I sometimes say about Mad Men is I don't think people realize is that the golden era of cocktails, if you really want to look for the best time in cocktails, at least historically,
Yeah.
you're going to look before Prohibition. The 1950s and the 1960s had certain cocktails and they were very popular.
Right.
But you had already seen sort of like this disintegration of the quality behind cocktails.
Meaning what? When you say the ingredients used or?
Well, the range of
globbing
ingredients that
it
are
up with-
available,
yeah.
the skill behind the bartenders. I'm not saying there weren't great skilled bartenders. There were, and those have been there all along. But the height of really bartending, when we think about it, was in the golden age, sometime between 1860 and 1919.
What was that driven by? Money? They saw the end coming? I mean, what?
Money, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people in San Francisco were paying for whiskey with gold, you know,
Yeah.
earlier on in the 19th century. So definitely bartenders had became very, very popular.
Yeah.
There was one named Jerry Thomas in 1860s who kind of like was known for having these diamond stick pins and 2 white rats that would run around his shoulders. I know that sounds horrible, by the way.
As long as he didn't use their products for the drinks.
Yeah, well, not that we know of.
Well, not that we know of.
Not muddled in
They
old
call it
fashioned.
craft for a reason.
Yeah. So basically, you know, you had that great period. Now, there's certain other discrete periods whether it's tiki drinks or some of the revival in 1950s of classic cocktails and that sort
Right.
of Mad Men era that's now come to be known as. But realistically, those were more driven by people making cocktails at home or in their office.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first went to work in New York at the Time and Life building, my first day on the job, they were, you know, pens, pencils, notepads and whatnot. And then the secretary said to me, "What do you drink?" And I was like, I don't know. And she said, "No, for the office bar."
Right.
It's like, are you serious? I'd come from the wire services. We didn't have office bars there. We had Bassins. But
How does productivity keep alive today without drinking during the day? I don't understand it.
that is such an interesting, I don't know, you know, it's, I was looking back over some of your columns and that you wrote when you were writing for The Atlantic, and you had one on binge drinking, and you were kind of you were doing a turn on binge drinking.
Right.
You weren't really endorsing going and drinking a bottle of vodka through a tube in a college dorm. You were saying
Not necessarily.
But you were saying by the medical classification of binge drinking, when you went out to a party and over 5 hours, I think had 7 drinks.
Right. I
That
think really
qualified.
what had happened is the CDC was trying to make this argument for alcohol being extremely dangerous. And I'm not saying it's not dangerous, but the way that they were categorizing it was without a lack of with no context.
Mm-hmm.
The way we drink is entirely contextual. The way that we experience alcohol and the way that we behave during it is really based on the way that we're raised, our culture, and the specific circumstances of where and when we drink. And so trying, you know, when I read this report the next day, that night I had been to a dinner where I had a pairing. Which I guess, according to them, would constitute binge drinking.
Yeah, what do you say when you go to one of those dinners where you're having 8 courses and they say, "We'll have a wine with each one,"
Right.
you know?
And basically, you know, according to their research, I should have contracted an STI, stabbed somebody to death, and crashed a car. And instead, I just took a taxi home and watched half an episode of How I Met Your Mother and fell asleep. So I didn't really, you know, engage in this
Yeah.
thing. So all I wanted to say is not that their research is not important and not that alcohol is not dangerous, but it was just a weird contextualization that they weren't contextualizing it, that it was out of context.
It's interesting too, because we are, in two paths of alcohol right now, and largely in what everybody likes to call the millennials.
Yeah.
They are very much the forefront of the craft cocktail movement, but at the same time, they are very involved in kind of the negative side of binge drinking. I mean, they really do. They drink in ways I don't even see the point of it except annihilation. And I wonder if is there any correlation with that and the post-World War II generation, that, you know, when you talk about, because you talk about the Mad Men time,
right.
and that those drinks, a lot of people were drinking them at home.
Right.
And I wonder if that wasn't an era where you just wanted to kind of get anesthetized.
I
Not spend a lot of time making the drink.
Right.
You know, just
I definitely think that there's these different periods and they follow different national events, and how we approach alcohol has a lot to do with our mood or our feeling,
Yeah.
not just as an individual but as a culture.
Right.
But I have to say that, like, to me, the way that I think about drinking, the way that I think drinking should happen and where it should happen, is when you're taking the time to make a quality-oriented drink, when you're really thinking through the ingredients and you're making something special. It really adds to the environment. Really, it can take us away, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That there's nothing wrong with relieving stress through enjoying a good dry martini.
Wish you'd been at my doctor's appointment this week when I was getting lectured. I mean, I was like, oh, stop, I've given up every other vice I have, and don't make me give this. So I want to read this quote of yours. I just love this, because this is Derek to Imbibe magazine. I started bartending because I was a shiftless loser. And to be honest, at the time I just thought to myself, someone is the greatest bartender in the world. I don't know who that is, but I don't know why it couldn't be me. And you just got named Bartender of the Year by Imbibe, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
From shiftless loser to...
Well, I still have a little bit of that tendency, but I think what it comes down to is it really was a weird decision in my life where I didn't know what I was going to do. I was into so many different things, but I'd studied anthropology, right? And that was so important to my worldview. It changed the way I thought about everything. And so this opportunity to sit in front of a glass of alcohol, a drink, you know,
drink.
to
Not
sit
a
in
glass
front of
of
a
wine,
drink,
a drink.
And to see it as a prism of how you experience the world, it changed everything for me. I realized it was a rabbit hole. That, you know, when you're talking about a glass of whiskey, you're really talking about the whole, you know, history of Western civilization.
Right.
And in that, you can find so many sort of lines that you go through that connect you back to World War II, or connect you back to Europe, to Scotland.
Yeah.
And then that line leads back to the Middle East.
All parts
you know?
of the world have some form of alcohol, right?
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah,
I think probably, maybe, I don't know, even the ones that don't drink probably have some version of a tincture or something that would be...
Well, yeah, absolutely. In Iran, that was where you have the birth of distillation, at least was part of the story that we understand. So
everybody should go to a distillery once.
That's right.
It's a fascinating thing. While we talk about drinking, maybe we don't want you just to stand there feeling left out. Do you want to talk us through a drink that maybe JP's going to pull together for us, and I'll just keep asking you questions while he makes it?
Absolutely. So basically, you know, we make classic cocktails, and we love classic cocktails.
At all your businesses.
At all our businesses.
Mockingbird Hill.
Eat the Rich, Southern Efficiency.
That's the whole thing.
And the forthcoming Columbia Room.
And then the Columbia Room will come back.
And so we try our best to be inventive at times, but for the most part, we follow a line. We try to understand how they're made in the past. This is the same with a chef. You know, you learn to make a specific dish, and then you can invent on top of that. Then you can add to it, and as your experience kind of evolves, then you can make new and interesting drinks or food based on that. So I had a patron sit down one day, and he said, well, I want you to make me a daiquiri. And I said, great. And this is a classic drink. The daiquiri, people have the strawberry daiquiri in mind.
It
goes back to pre-Prohibition. It was created by a guy named Jennings Cox, who worked for the U.S. Navy in engineering down in Cuba. And he put together this specific ratio of lime, rum, and sugar, and that was it. A guy named Admiral Lucius Johnson, had it, enjoyed it. He was a friend of his, and he brought it back to the United States in Washington, D.C. in 1909. So the first place the daiquiri came to the United States was in D.C. So in many ways, we could claim it as a D.C.
It's
drink.
a D.C. It's an indigenous. Now, what are we using here?
So what happened was they asked me to make a daiquiri,
Right.
but they asked me to use chinar, which JP was going to pour in a minute.
Okay.
Now, chinar is an Italian digestivo, and it's complex, and it's made from artichokes. So you can imagine this is kind of like a stump the bartender moment. They're like, here you go, make something with artichokes and make it taste like a daiquiri.
And that's
Enjoy.
fresh lime juice?
Fresh lime juice. So we added blackstrap molasses rum, which is a darker, richer rum made by
Right.
Crucian. It's from St. Croix.
Yeah.
And then we put in chinar, lime juice, and a little cane sugar. So it actually was meant to kind of be modeled after daiquiri, but obviously incorporating these new ingredients, richer, darker ingredients. So a lot of people say it tastes like breakfast in a weird way because there's these maple syrup
that's
overtones.
okay. I mean, you got to have breakfast. Might as
So-
well start it off brightly, right?
So I've already encouraged binge drinking, and now I say try it for breakfast. So.
Have it for breakfast. So this is your recipe.
So this is an original recipe, but again, it's very much
based on history.
It's based on.
Do you
history.
think cocktails are more interesting than wine? Since you're so interested in the stories, I mean, doesn't wine have one story and cocktails could have 5?
It depends how you look at interesting. For me, yes, because we bring some creativity to a cocktail. You can even take a wine and turn it into an interesting drink, right? But if you have a bottle of wine, the story is
Got
already
a date
happened.
on it, an appellation on it,
Yeah.
it's where, all of its information.
And
is
that's
right on the label.
fascinating. I mean, wine is an incredible product that comes from an agricultural,
It's farming.
experience. Yeah, and so I think it's important to look and see where it comes from, the terroir, and all of that is fascinating to me. But what I want to do is I want to take that and I want to interact with it in a way that.
Great sound, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I'm salivating already.
Yeah. So
like Pavlov's dog.
are there special workouts you do so that you can get the right, because there
Yeah.
is the right shake. There's
Yeah,
the
we're
wrong
actually
shake
putting
and
out
the right shake.
an entire workout tape based on bartending where you're lifting on the shelf,
It says-
you're shaking.
It says Tom Cruise be damned,
stirring.
right? There is no cocktail here. We don't go throwing the bottles up in the air.
That's exactly
But
right.
but there is the shake. You really, what's the method? I mean, should you count,
there's some
sing a
art
song?
to it.
Yeah,
It
what is
turns
the
out
art?
that from a measurable perspective, that if you shake something with ice for 12 seconds, that it has the same general amount of dilution and the same amount of coldness at that point,
Right.
because those things are correlated. And at least that's the measurable aspects of it. But I've always thought that there was
Thank
some
you.
kind of action that happens in terms of the way you position the ice and the kind of shaking you do that can create sort of like a different texture on the cocktail. So this one is very creamy. By the way, cheers.
Cheers
Thank
to you,
you.
Derek. Congratulations
Cheers,
on.
everybody.
Hey, everybody. And you all have a drink, I hope. Yes, good.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
That's delicious, right?
Yeah, it does taste like breakfast. It does
Good
have
morning.
it does have savory tones to it.
Right.
That is, I would never have made it as a daiquiri, and yet there is a kind of refreshing aftertaste.
That's right. So in terms of the shake, there's
Oh,
a guy named Kazuo
nice.
Ueda who,
Is there celery in that?
Just chinar.
Okay, because there's
Artichoke.
this, I thought maybe you used celery bitters or something in there. I don't know.
it does have that little,
Bit of whatever that is that's in celery that tastes like celery.
and it's slightly bitter,
Yeah,
right? So it's
I
not,
like that.
it's refreshing, bitter, and rich at the same time.
I'm driven to grown-up cocktails rather than, I can't even imagine having alcohol with ice cream,
Right.
as a drink, because I just don't get the point. That's the wrong delivery system. I really
A little
don't.
bit of ice cream has always been delicious, but I agree
what?
with you.
Yeah.
Kieck sherry on top of it.
Okay,
That's pretty
all right.
tasty.
We'll see.
yeah.
Okay, because I'm a piker on sherry, so
Yeah.
I'm on a learning curve there. But having daiquiris makes me think of Cuba and makes me think of all our renewed interest in Cuba now.
That's
and
right.
we do have a cocktail history from Cuba. Will that be brought back, changed up? I mean, is Cuba still drinking the caipirinha and the mojito, or are they drinking something else down there now?
Well,
That's going to land here as
they have mojitos, they have daiquiris, and for the first time, I think in a very long time, I don't know when the last time is, but I know last year was the first time in at least a couple decades that an American has been invited to compete in a prestigious competition down there to make the best
Right.
daiquiri at what's called the Temple of the Daiquiri down there. El Floridita. So basically, this guy, John Lehrmeyer, he's a Miami bartender. He's an incredible bartender. He went down there and competed. So.
Are you going to go? Are you going to?
Well, I'll go and I'll happily enjoy the drinks.
Oh my God.
So I just want to go drink down there.
Well, yeah. Will you take us all? Will you make a
Right.
trip out
There's
of
just
it?
like this,
a
like-
Cuba bar crawl with Derek Brown.
Done. Yeah, absolutely. If we can
think
leave
we-
in the next couple weeks, that would be
I think
perfect.
we all buy a ticket. A few questions about why shaken versus stirred. When do you stir? When do you shake?
So one of the things I wanted to add, so Kazuo Ueda is this bartender from Japan, one of Japan's top bartenders. He's been doing it for over 40 years, and he owns a bar called Tender Bar, which is a really incredible place. I visited there in 2009, and I took a seminar with Kazuo Ueda. It was very instructive. But he has something called the hard shake, right? Where it's this specific way of angling the shaker, doing what he says are 3 positions and 4 beats. So
my
you
God.
do it like this,
Yeah.
very quickly. You have to watch the video of him doing it. He's very elegant doing it. Sitting at his bar is incredible. But he talks about how the ice moves in the shaker and creates a certain texture to it, which is rich and creamy. And it's kind of incredible when you're there. Whether this thing really exists or not, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's up to each
it's a nice
individual.
science. Who knows if it's for real? But
Who knows, right?
But
but the reason that you would shake something versus stir it is because you have liquids at different densities, right? You have cream, or you have eggs, or you have citrus, and you have alcohol, and all of these are so radically different that you have to shake to combine them. So it is not the act of emulsification, but it's similar to the act of emulsification.
so it's not about making it cold. It's about actually mixing it up.
Well, it's about 3 things. It's about making it cold, diluting it, and blending the ingredients.
Okay.
So a shake is a very effective means to do all 3 of those. A stir is more artful in the sense that you can control, like I said, in 12 seconds, when shaking it, it's about the same cold level and dilution. But if you stir it, you can affect it a little differently.
You're never going to get this little froth on the top.
No, and you
are
won't get the ice shards either.
I love the ice shards.
And some people do, and some people
Once
don't.
upon a time, they called that bruising. And
Right,
I
bruising
find
the
now
gin,
I
think.
go to bars and I say I want my martini bruised, and they look at me, what lady? And I'm like, they just don't know.
Well, they would say you'd bruise the gin, and I was like, you can't hurt gin. You can't hurt gin. So, yeah, but you know, in a martini, I don't like that because you have these little pockets of water on it.
I just love the coldness.
Right, so get it cold without that, even better.
Yeah,
Right.
doing it. How do you do that?
Using frozen gin, using refrigerated
Well, I
vermouth.
mean, shouldn't everybody keep their gin and vodka in the freezer anyway?
If they like it that way, I do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I just think that it's not going to freeze unless your kid's gotten into it, and then you're going to know your kid's gotten into it
Right.
because it's going to be this hard bottle.
Yeah, pretty key. Well, you know, when we were kids, we would just sneak a little off the top, and then we just go around. So start with the peach schnapps, work your way around. So, if you had to pour a little iced tea back in some of the whiskey.
And while we're on ice, ice is very important. I mean,
Yeah.
the stuff that comes out of your refrigerator versus a bag of real ice, or making your own ice, or having an ice machine.
Right. I mean, a lot of people keep everything in their fridge, whether it's like frozen peas or, some.
Yeah, but those ice dispensers on freezers?
Oh, yeah.
That's not real ice.
We get a lot of odor from it. It's not great. Ice is ice, so in the long run, you use whatever you have. But if you're looking
I don't
to
believe
make,
ice is ice.
but if you're looking to make a certain style of cocktail, or
Yeah.
you want it to dilute in a different way, yes, then you can affect it with different ice. The thing is that I think we came out like when a lot of us you refer to me as a godfather of
Yeah.
of mixology. I don't think that's entirely true. There's many people who've done great
I
work
know,
here
Derek,
before
but it was
that.
meant as a compliment.
Thank you, I appreciate it. But I would say that, when we first started thinking about this, and this is about a decade ago, ice became very important because we didn't have an option. right? You just had that chip ice or your refrigerator ice, and that was pretty much all you had.
Yeah.
And so since then,
Crushed ice could be a wonderful thing. You could never make
Crushed
julep
ice.
without it, right?
you can use cylinders that would be in highballs that would keep it from diluting quicker. And scotch, some people like ice in their scotch, having a large one with less surface area, right? Because if it has less surface area, it's larger, it has less surface area, which
Yeah.
is kind of contradictory to most people's thinking. But if there's all these small pieces of ice, they basically have more surface that you could be covered
Right.
with water.
I love all the new ice trays, the silicone ice trays.
Yeah, those are great.
I just think they're a great thing.
Very
everybody.
useful for a home bartender. And so essentially, like, ice is important. I don't mean to diminish that. But at this point, a decade after people, really 15, 20 years after people have been talking about it, we really have a lot of options. So for the home bartender, maybe it's the same options generally,
Yeah.
unless they go out and buy a lot of equipment. I can tell you, bartending is one of the most expensive hobbies you can have.
But it's hand in hand with cooking. I mean, if you're going to be into cooking, aren't you? If you're going to kit out your kitchen with all the things you might need to cook with, aren't you going to want to have a bar? And if you are going to have a bar, what do you tell people to start with?
Right. Or if you're going to have a bar, why have a kitchen in the first place and just set up a really
Because
nice
it is
bar?
becoming the new kitchen, isn't it?
Exactly.
It really is. But what do you tell people? I'm sure people ask you
Yeah.
this all the time. But I want to have a nice home bar. What do I have to have? What's
Well,
the bare minimum?
You got to peek in Julia Child's kitchen, right? It's
Yeah, I don't remember
incredible.
seeing a bar in there though.
And well, I'm sure she had a couple.
Yeah, I'm sure she had a
bottles
few
underneath.
bottles stashed. Right.
As we remember from her show, she
Right.
was
She was having a good time,
yeah, she
right?
definitely. So if you're a cook, you're buying like Crusade and copper pans, and you're getting latest gadgets. I think for me, you can do all of that, and there's great like websites now. When I first started, I didn't even have a cocktail spoon. Like literally, I showed up to work at a bar, and I was like, "Do you have a cocktail spoon?" And they were like, "No."
Where was this bar that you showed up?
Adams Morgan.
Adams Morgan. That was your first bar job?
Oh yeah. And so when I heard you're supposed to stir a cocktail, I went and I got an iced teaspoon, and I did this sort of like chicken wing, is how I
Yeah,
describe
yeah,
it,
yeah.
where I'm just kind of like doing this with the ice, and it seemed stupid, honestly. I was like, what the hell am I doing? And everybody would do something that I would call the swishel. So if you asked for a Manhattan or a martini, it would be sort of this,
That's how they
mixing
mix
it like this, and it's like, that doesn't mix anything. You couldn't blend anything like that. And so I was trying with this spoon, it was goofy, but then I got a cocktail spoon, and I was like, wow, this is a very useful tool. All of a sudden, from there...
What made it different?
Well, it's longer, so it's
Okay.
easier to stir,
All right.
and because of the
Do
way
you have
it's
one?
shaped...
Here okay, there we go.
and we have a specific way of holding it that when we're stirring, it's a gentle movement.
Yeah.
And so we can control...
You've got the move. You do. I
And
don't
it
think I
looks
could
it
do
looks
that.
easy. It's not
No,
that hard.
I'm not even going to embarrass myself by trying to match
The other
you.
thing is, if you want to crack ice, you can use it, right?
That is true,
If
yeah.
you want to layer something on top of it, you can use that.
Right.
You know.
So that's an
if you want to
essential.
measure it, you
Yeah.
can use it. So, if you wanted to be fancy and pour some kind of sparkling wine
I don't
down
think I'm
into
gonna
it,
try
yeah.
that, but
so
it's
you
a
have
really
all of
lovely
these-
idea.
This simple implement, like it's funny because people are kind of, when I can't remember, it was an interview and somebody asked me like, "What's the coolest piece of equipment you have?" And I was like, "A cocktail spoon."
Okay.
It
How many
seems
do you
so
have?
simple. Oh, maybe a dozen at
Yeah.
least. But I just think it's really useful.
Okay, so you want to have that, and then when you get a shaker, what do you get?
So there's
You
three,
don't get glass, right? You've got to get some.
right. I think
Ideally
metal's better
silver,
because
but-
metal is a better conductor of this heat exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what you want to do when you're shaking, the heat is being extracted from the ice, and I'm sorry, from the liquor.
Right.
And you get that frost on the outside, right?
Yeah, that's
so.
nice.
Metal works better, is a better conductor than glass.
Mm-hmm.
So metal gets it colder quicker is the way to say
And
that.
is smaller or bigger better? I mean, are
It
you?
depends how many cocktails you're in.
But-
I have a big shaker that makes 6 cocktails at a time. I call it the
my
Kennedy. So,
No wonder you're all buffed up.
but there's 3 principal cocktail shakers. One's called a cobbler shaker. It's 3 pieces. It has the built-in strainer.
Right.
Then you have what he's using, I believe, is the Hawthorne. I'm sorry, not the Hawthorne. It's a Boston shaker. So that's 2 cups that fit together. But when people are shaking these, they have to kind of get.
They got to get the moves down.
They got to get the move down, but
Or there's
also
mess
you
everywhere.
have to get it to seal, and then
Yeah.
you have to find this way of unsealing
Yeah.
it, which takes a little bit of effort. He's got it. he can do it.
Yeah, you
But,
did it all right yourself. Too.
Then there's a Parisian shaker, and a Parisian shaker has this sort of almost bullet-like shape, although at the top it's flat, but it's kind of, it's very attractive looking shaker. And that's mostly for looks, but we use it in different circumstances. So we use all the shakers.
Yeah.
Because I am obsessed with tools. So how much time do we have? I can just keep talking about tools.
No, you don't want to leave, do you? No, I love all of this, but so we know. So you need a measure. You need
the jigger, right?
The jigger, and you should have a glass vessel.
Right.
You should have a stirring cup, right?
So this is like they're called a Yari pitcher.
What do you call that? Just a pitcher?
It's a cocktail pitcher. This was made a particular one called Yari. And basically, like, that's very useful for stirring. But you can do this in the bottom of your shaker.
I know, but you'd make a Manhattan in that. You wouldn't shake a Manhattan, right?
I would not shake a Manhattan.
You'd stir a Manhattan in that.
I would not bruise. No, just kidding. No, you don't shake a Manhattan. Like, it's one of the funniest things. This is where we are in 2015 versus 2005. That I worked at a bar where we had, DC, the waiters that used to be in DC are different than they're today.
No kidding.
We had something that we would, in the industry, refer to as the French Mafia. It was this group of French waiters that seemed to work everywhere. And this one particular guy, I was making a Manhattan, and I served it with bitters, and I stirred it, and he said, "They don't want it like that. They don't want bitters. They don't want it stirred, And I
what
was
did they want?
Well, I think he was
what he
referring
wanted,
to a
right?
time, a period of time where the Manhattan was not, being made well. I mean, it was okay.
Nor was an old fashioned.
Right, it had whiskey in it, so fine,
Right.
it tasted okay. But
Well, again, that goes back to being just let's have the impact. We don't need the process.
that's exactly right. So I argued with him. I brought in a bunch of books and showed him that bitters belong in a Manhattan, and things have really changed.
Where was this?
Polena. And his name is Guy, but I don't want to call anybody out.
All right. We have
that,
Frank
Guy?
Ruda just down the street now, so maybe he's down there.
Oh, well, Frank, and here's a great story. I owe so much to Frank Ruda because I made a cocktail called a Sazerac, right?
That's what you did at TED Talks,
When
too.
somebody first told me about a Sazerac, they could have said the word Xanadu. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. They were like, "Can you make a Sazerac?" I was like, "What? Like, what are you asking for? It's weird." And then I looked it up and I found all the ingredients, and it was hard to find the ingredients for herb sant because absinthe was not legal back then. You had to find Peychaud's bitters, not Angostura bitters.
Right.
It was very complicated. I went through. I found everything eventually by calling people, not the internet. Makes me sound very old, but it's true.
It was a time.
Yeah, and so I put this cocktail together and I made it for Frank Ruda. And I said, "What do you think?" And he tried it and he said, "I could sip this all night." And then he said, "It's like one of the most complex and interesting cocktails that he had had." And I realized that this is a great culinary expression. Like, this drink, the Sazerac made well, is something not just to get hammered on. It was something that was
To
a
savor.
culinary creation,
Yeah.
right? And so if you think about it, that just changed my entire mood and mind about cocktails. I realized, okay, this is important. This is something that we're lacking and we need to do. So I made tons of Sazeracs, and everybody told me at the time that was in the industry, not even the customers, it's too boozy. You're making drinks that people don't like them,
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I said, well, it doesn't matter. They're beautiful, they're part of our heritage, they're part of our culture, and we've lost it. And I want to bring it back.
What was the turning point that suddenly made you the voice of bartending and cocktailing? I mean, what happened? What did you do? Was it just the Columbia Room? Was it a particular drink? Was it just a change in society and you happened to be there in the moment? I mean, what?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably like being a surfer. Like, I just happened to catch the right wave at the right time while I was.
And you were into it.
And I knew how to ride it.
At that moment when people wanted, you were there ready to. Did you use?
But I don't mean that in terms of a trend, because it comes from a true love of these things.
Yeah, no, it's more like a revival than a trend.
That's right. And just the moment that I started looking at these books, I read William Grimes, who was with the New York Times, his book Straight Up Around the Rocks. And that was put out in, I think, 2002 or 3 or something like that. And I was reading about this great history of bartending, the skilled bartenders back in the golden age.
Yeah.
all of these things, and I was just so impressed.
But they weren't
with it.
making their own bitters, were they?
They were by
Were they?
necessity.
Really?
By necessity.
By necessity.
Yeah. So back then, it was more likely that you would get the recipe for these bitters and you would imitate it.
How do you make bitters?
You start with bitter things. You put them in alcohol. It sounds very ridiculous, but
Well, give
it's
us
true.
an example.
So gentian root is an example. You can use roots, you can use peels, you can use different spices, and you can combine those with either macerate them in alcohol, which means soak them in alcohol for a long time, or you could macerate them in water, which is not as good of a solvent, but works as well. And you can create a bitter substance. You know, it's like a compound tincture, really. And gentian root is a
Do you
very
need
common
to
one.
go to all that? I mean, is that more just doing that for fun, the way you want to make your own mayonnaise, but you can just as easily go out and buy perfectly wonderful bitters?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean,
'Cause
the
it-
short answer is like, it is a weird thing that fun in our society is going to some like strange Chinese herbal shop and like picking out these like different ingredients and put them in alcohol. But I found it fun actually to
We're
make
having
it.
too much fun and the clock is winding down. I think we ought to move on to the next drink.
While you're speaking of bitters, this is
There
we're gonna
we
finish with
go.
something that highlights the bitters and is sort of the original cocktail, the old-fashioned.
You know, and that was the first drink you ever made for me. It was a revelation. Up until then, the only brown alcohol I'd ever had was rum, and only in the islands. I just didn't think of it as something. And now I read that you're making old fashions with rum.
That's right. That's right.
Not all of them,
And
but
you're
some.
following the path of George Washington because
Am
he
I?
really liked
well,
rum.
we're about the same
And
age.
then he started making his own whiskey.
Yeah.
And he really liked that too,
Yeah.
the rye whiskey. So he had the largest distillery.
Well, you know, I
the
was
country.
very fortunate to go to whiskey camp.
Yeah, at Mount Vernon.
At Mount Vernon, at George Washington's distillery, with all the dudes from Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't even pronounce the names of all those Scotch drinks that everybody dreams about, but I think I was with all the great master craftsmen of Scotch, and they look like.
Were they all wearing dresses?
Well, they look like caddies at the Masters golf tournament because they have their little zip-up jumpsuits that they're all wearing, and everybody's just and they're waiting for the first little drops to come out, and it tasted like moonshine to me, to be perfectly honest, when it first, and it probably wasn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
But it's a fascinating process, and everybody should do it. Where did you go from Polina?
So this is sort of how I ended up where I am today in terms of being
Right here at the
a
Georgetown
professional
Club.
drinker, which is fantastic.
Getting paid a good sum for it.
Exactly.
That's nice. Cheers to that.
Cheers. So I started working in Polina, and I was a bartender, and I thought, you know, like in a weird way, like most of my bartender friends were making their way through college or whatever. There's a few examples of people who are really doing something more special. But I thought, like, okay, if I want to get more respect and I want to learn more, I should become a sommelier. So I studied with the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I went through a couple different rounds of that, and I like that, and I think wine is very important, although the bartender is sort of the American version of a sommelier. And then I started working at various restaurants. I worked at Citronelle.
You did.
For a
You were at
while.
Citronelle,
As a
and
sommelier.
you were like a protege of Mark Slater, who was the sommelier there, and he had come from Jean Louis.
And he told me all the stories, which I won't repeat. But Mark said something really important. It's probably one of the most important pieces of advice. He said, Derek, a cocktail should be refreshing. And it seems so simplistic.
Yeah, I mean,
But I
right.
think it was one of those
When
moments
would it ever be other
well, you know, people do tend to make things
with ice cream?
with ice. Well, I love ice cream, so I'm not going to go against ice
I'm
cream.
just talking
It's
about it
delicious.
being mixed with vodka.
Yeah, but there's, you know, people tend to make things overly complicated, and you can. And I think there's some fun in that, right?
Well, I love eggnog, so.
Eggnog is awesome.
Yeah, eggnog is
made
awesome.
fresh, made
Right.
fresh.
But actually, in truth, eggnog is an ice cream.
That's right.
You know?
It is. Yeah, it is.
It's a nog.
That's exactly right. And so I think there's some fun in that. But if you're making it at home, you know, this cocktail is not very complicated. It requires some technique. It requires some good ingredients. But with a little bit of practice, you can make a really excellent cocktail. And that's what I really want to get across to people. That in the end, like, okay, fine, we're going to go out there and we're going to make very complicated drinks because we want to do something very special for you. But for that everyday enjoyment for something that's simple, it's not complicated.
Do you need a muddler to make this?
No, you can use a spoon.
Okay, so you don't need it. You need a muddler for a mint julep, though.
Nope, you can use a spoon.
Okay, but it's
I
nice
don't
to
get
have a
paid
muddler.
by this company that makes the spoon, by the way.
Okay, no.
No,
Nor do you get paid by the
muddler-
muddler company either.
Right, a muddler is nice, but the problem with the muddler is people tend to do this sort of like over
Muddle
muddling
too much.
thing. Yeah, they're over muddling. So if you ever seen like the Bacardi commercial where
Yeah.
they're like muddling to the beat, you know, it's
Yeah.
and they're just like killing the mint,
Excuse
right? If you chew on a piece of mint, the first like bite is this beautiful aroma.
Yes.
The second
Speaking
bite,
of fresh.
it starts to get bitter, and by the time you've chewed on it for a minute, it just tastes gross.
Oh my
And
God, this
so-
smells good.
So I think
cheers,
it's important
everyone.
to realize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Salud. Oh my God.
Delicious.
Oh, that is so nice. What did you use? Rye, bourbon? What did you?
This was an old fashioned we've made a lot in Southern Efficiency, and we normally use rye, but for this we used a bourbon, but a nice little higher proof, 100 proof bourbon.
Yeah.
It's a little tiny bit of dry
I'm glad you
Madeira,
told me.
a little bit of honey, some bitters.
Yeah.
It's an old fashioned with a little bit of variation to it.
Well, it's delicious, and I'm glad that we only have a few minutes left. We have 5 minutes left. So the other night I was out to dinner, and I noticed this contraption being taken to various tables, and I asked what it was, and I was told it was an absinthe tower.
Oh, right, with the water.
Yes,
dripping
and
everything.
so I had to have it, of course, and so they brought this glass tower filled with ice water, a very beautiful carved glass. It had two little spigots,
Right.
and then under it, two little glasses, and then like a little
Spoon.
so yeah, but it well, it was a spoon, but it
It's
it
a
held
slotted
sugar,
spoon,
a
yeah.
slotted spoon, and
It's
it
actually
held,
called an absinthe spoon. So.
there you go. And it held a sugar cube.
Right.
And there was this drip, drip, drip. And then much anticipation and a lot of it. And it really tasted to me like having Pernod or.
It is the slowest way in the world to make simple syrup, basically. You just drip on a cube after a while. But the reason that they do that is because with absinthe, it has something called a louche, which basically it turns colors, and I'm sure you saw that from a green.
Yes, we
to
had
this
we had
milky
we had
color,
we had a white one, a white milky one, and we had a dark one. They brought two kinds.
and that enhances
Yeah.
the drink. I mean, straight absinthe is high proof, and it tastes very strongly of
Yeah.
anise. And so, which is most people identify as licorice.
Yeah, no, you know what? It was actually a perfect digestif.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I don't know what the fuss was about. None of us got any crazier than we already
You
were.
didn't cut off anybody's ear?
Not that I know of. But it really was a lovely digestif. And that goes back to something else about cocktails. There are things to drink before dinner, and there are things to drink after dinner, and they actually serve a purpose in the whole process of
That's right.
eating food.
Cocktails, most cocktails were thought of as before dinner or pre-prandial, and then some cocktails, your ice cream and egg cocktails, are generally thought
Your
of as
flips.
post-prandial.
Yeah.
Right. Now we have a different world in which we pair cocktails with food, where we can make them more food-friendly. So I think it's a little different than it has been, but I think it's wonderful. You can really make a cocktail exactly to your taste. Let's say you didn't like this drink, right? I think you're wrong, but it's a delicious drink.
No, I like
it. But if you didn't like it, you could take down the proof. You could change the spirit. You could put rum in there. You could put gin in there. You could try.
I
all
want
these
to
different
try it
things.
with rum. I would bet you don't even need to sweeten it much then, do you? Because
Then you could use
because the
less
rum
sweetener.
has the sweet.
Or if you like it sweet, you could use more sweetener. So that's the thing about a cocktail that's so special, and really why it's such an important part of American culture is because it's very individualized, right? So it really appeals to a person.
Yeah.
And it really tells a story of a time and place, which I think all of that makes it such an important part of our culinary world.
Going in fall, this is going to be airing in the fall and running on the air through the winter months. What drinks are you thinking about now as it gets colder?
Definitely when whiskey comes to mind, and
This
I
being a
think
perfect example.
gin too, but here we're thinking more of the richer gins, right? So gin used to be thought of as one thing, right? I think just by the public in general. And we've seen that there's really just so many different styles of gin. There's London Dry Gin, there's Old Tom Gin, there's Genever, there is New Western Gin, which are more floral and generally made from craft distillers. And so you can really play with different gins, but in the winter you have Old Tom Gin, which is a little sweeter, or you have just down the street at New Columbia Distilleries, they do something called a ginevite, which is a mixture of gin and aquavit together.
Interesting.
And then it's barrel aged as well. So it makes a perfect winter gin.
Yeah, if it's your desert island drink, what would it be?
Desert Island drink apple juice. I love apple juice.
What would be your desert island drink, JP?
Whiskey.
Whiskey.
I'm not messing around with that.
So you get washed ashore and you want a cake. I know. I mean, after everything he's just said to us, he's talking about apple juice. Oh,
you know,
my
you
God.
can't drink whiskey every morning. Can
Yes,
you?
Well,
can.
I don't know. I mean, I can't believe we're out of time. This is just we've only touched the surface. You're just going to have to come back every season, you know?
I'll happily come
because
back.
isn't he a wonderful guest? Are you guys having a good time? Thank you, JP. It was yes, you can move a little bit, just a little bit. And thank you. But I really think the best way to say thank you to Derek is cheers.
Cheers.
See you all. Thank you.